All right, this lesson is for 10.2, Part 1. As a quick reminder, don't forget that on Thursday or Friday, whichever day you choose to take the math quiz, you do have to know the vocabulary found in Chapter 10.1, the 4 different angles, as well as what supplementary and complementary means. There are more definitions in 10.2. Today we're going to cover adjacent angles, vertical and congruent angles. Those are found on page 516. Also, you have to know what an intersecting line is, what perpendicular lines are, and what parallel lines are. And lastly, you have to know what corresponding angles are. So that's 13 terms that you will see on matching on the quiz. Okay, I'm going to go through each of them. There's a possibility that there will actually be 3 videos to this lesson because it's pretty complicated. Sorry, but that's just how it is. Okay, so let's talk about adjacent angles. I'm not sure where you are right now, but adjacent to me is the other chair at the dining room table. So you might can figure out from that sentence that adjacent means next to, okay? You can see the definition on page 516. 2 angles that share a common side and a vertex and do not overlap are called adjacent angles. So these two, that's a terrible drawing, but these 2 angles are adjacent because they have one common side and they meet at a point here, and that's their vertex. Okay? All right. So those are adjacent. Keep that in mind. We'll come back to it in just a second. Look at example 1. We have 4 angles actually. Let me just draw these intersecting lines. We'll come back to that in a minute. And it says to name all pairs of adjacent and supplementary angles, and they are numbered as such. Okay, adjacent angles, angles that are next to each other. So this is how you should write your answer to that. You would say adjacent angles are angle 1 and angle 2. Also angle 2 and angle 3. Angle 3 and angle 4. And angle 4 and angle 1. Those pairs are touching each other, have the same vertex, and have one common side. Okay? Now, it also asks you to name supplementary angles, but notice there's a comma there. So it says name all pairs of adjacent, comma, supplementary angles. So these angles, for example, angle 1 and 2 are supplementary and adjacent. They're next to each other, share a common side, but also together they form 180 degrees. Okay? So you would just list the 4 pairs. All right, next definition. Let me clear this off. Is for vertical angles. So same diagram, we can talk about vertical angles. The definition of vertical angles is when 2 lines meet at a point, just like in our example. The angles that are opposite each other are called vertical angles. So vertical angles are opposite of each other, not next to. What's that term? Adjacent. We're talking about vertical now. And here's an interesting term that you should be familiar with. We've talked about it before, I believe. Vertical angles are always congruent. They're always equal in measure, okay? So angle 1 and angle 3 are vertical angles because they're opposite each other. They also have the same measure. They are equal in measure. And then hopefully you can see the other pair of vertical angles. What would they be? 2 and 4, okay? And so if you were told to list the vertical angles in this drawing, you would say angle 1 and angle 3. Or as the book did it, you could say angle 2 is congruent to angle 4. Okay, that's what a vertical angle is. So let's put some of this knowledge to the test. Look at example 2 at the top of page 517. Again, we have intersecting lines, 1, 2, 3, 4 for our angles. And it says, given that M, the measure of angle M, is 105 degrees, find the measure of angle 2. Well, what's the vertical angle or the congruent angle to angle 4? It is angle 2. And we learned that vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so angle 2 would also have to be 105 degrees. All right. Pause the video, take a few seconds to answer 1, 2, and 3 of guided practice, then start it back up and I'll go over them with you. Okay. Guided practice number 1, you are to refer for all 3 of them to the diagram in example 2. So let me get that back on here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, number 1. Name all pairs of adjacent supplementary angles. So you should have answered, same as before, 1 and 2. I'm going to go really quickly through this. You should put angle, but I'm trying to go fast. 2 and 3, 3 and 4, 4 and 1, just like before. Okay, that's how guided practice 1 should be answered. All right, number 2. Given that angle measure of angle 4 is 105. Man, they're very creative in coming up with new measurements, huh? What would be the angle measure for 1, not 2? They're not asking for the vertical angle right now. They're saying, what is the measure of angle 1? This one right here. So, as a review from 10.1, you should see that this line right here is a straight angle. And what are the degrees of a straight angle? 180 degrees. So in between angle 4 and angle 1, we have to come up with 180 degrees. 180 minus 105 is 75 degrees. That's the measure of angle 1. And then number 3 says, use your answer from exercise 2 to find the measure of angle 3. Okay, so here's how I'm going to do this. We know that 4 and 3, they are a certain type of angle together, pair. Do you remember what that is? What are 4 and 3? You might say they're adjacent, but adjacent angles are always supplementary. So we could do it that way. We could say they're forming 180 degrees off of this straight angle, okay? So again, 180 minus 105 would be 75. But what's the other way that you could find that it's 75? It's a vertical angle with angle 1. So these two angles, sorry for all of the scribbling on here, but these two angles are vertical. So there's 2 different ways that you can solve some of these. And that's why I did it both ways. All right, I'm going to clear this off. And we're going to go on and talk about lines. Okay, I've been using the term intersecting lines as I've been going through this. So what are intersecting lines? They are lines that intersect. They form an intersection. There you go. They meet at a point, only one point, okay? That's the definition of intersecting. That's the easiest of the lines and kind of it's common sense. Okay, but the next 2 are pretty particular. They don't just meet at a plain old point. There's specific rules about them, okay? 1 is parallel. Parallel lines never intersect. They never meet, okay? the sign for parallel lines is this. It's two parallel lines, okay? Now, in your book, they did it straight up and down, and I've actually never seen that before, but either way, when you see two lines drawn out like this, they're telling you those lines are parallel, okay? When you look in the book at different lines, you will see, and if you'll look down in this parallelogram, which has two pairs of parallel lines, you will see line M and line N, and they just have them sketched there. What I want you to notice, and this is very important, is that there is a little arrow drawn on the line. Okay, I didn't draw it very well, but these arrows mean that they're parallel. And sometimes you'll have intersecting lines with those that are also parallel, and if that's the case, you'll have, because you have two sets, they'll do the next one with two of those little arrows. So keep that in mind, okay? And then the other type is perpendicular. I have to look how to spell it. Perpendicular. And the sign for perpendicular is two lines that are perpendicular, okay? They intersect one another at a right angle. And they actually would form, this is the sign for perpendicular, but perpendicular lines would actually form 4 right angles. Okay, like that. But if you, and I don't think that the sign gets used very often, but that's what you would see. So perpendicular is this sign and parallel is this sign or that. Okay? Again, you have to know all of these definitions. What makes lines perpendicular? They form right angles when they intersect. Okay? What makes two lines parallel? They do not intersect. They never meet. Okay. Last one, corresponding angles. Now, let me draw this out, and I'm going to try to explain it very slowly, and then this video will be over. Okay? I'm reading from the book. Angles that occupy corresponding positions when a line intersects, that's this line, two other lines, those angles are called corresponding angles. All right, so the easiest way I know to explain this is to make you think about driving in your car down a road. You come to an intersection, okay? It has 4 corners. If you look, you're driving this way down the road. Here's my little car, okay? If you look from your car to the top or in front of you, the top right intersection, okay? And then you look at the next, the top right corner right here. At the next intersection, the top right corner is corresponding, okay? So in your book, these are numbered 1 and 2. And because they're both in the top right corner, they're called corresponding. They occupy corresponding or equal positions, but in different intersections, okay? And I think I've got the quiz out here. I'm going to read you the definition from the quiz because to me this is the most tricky one. Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Okay. Corresponding angles are angles that occupy corresponding positions when a line intersects two lines. Okay? Those are corresponding angles. All right, I'm going to stop this and come back, and we'll spend most of our time solving for angle measures using all these different definitions.